Tobias Ellwood.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Could I ask the Minister to make a statement on the leaking of top-secret military documents?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the unauthorised disclosure of classified US documents discovered last week was clearly a concerning development. The Defence Secretary spoke to his opposite number in the US last week and has been kept closely informed since. He is in Washington this week for a long-planned briefing to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, as well as other bilateral meetings. Clearly, he has been able to discuss things further with Secretary Lloyd Austin and others whilst there. The US Department of Defence and Intelligence Community is currently conducting its own investigation to determine the validity of those documents and the circumstances under which they were leaked. The UK commends the swift action taken by US law enforcement to investigate and respond to the leak, including the arrest of a suspect. As the Secretary of State, the US Department for Defence and the French MOD have already said, not all of this information apparently leaked is accurate. Colleagues will be frustrated, I know, that I am unable to tell them which bits are inaccurate, as these are sensitive intelligence matters, but it is important nonetheless to stress the need for caution when reporting what has apparently been leaked. And obviously, the investigation is now a matter for the US legal system. As the refreshed integrated review set out earlier this year, the US remains the UK's most important ally and partner. The depth of the UK's relationship with the US remains an absolutely essential pillar of our security. We remain committed to supporting Ukraine's armed forces in response to Russia's illegal invasion. Ukraine has repeatedly shown us their determination and resilience in the face of Russia's barbaric invasion, and as we have said, we are working in lockstep with allies through forums like the G7 and NATO and efforts like UK-led International Fund for Ukraine to get Ukraine the firepower it needs to rapidly regain its territory.
Tobias Ellwood.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for that statement. Can I begin with a declaration of interest, which is pertinent to this subject? I am a dual US national born in the USA, and I hold a US passport. I have grown up increasingly appreciating the value and indeed the importance of the unique and incredible bond that we have with our most trusted and valued security ally. But when a security leak of this magnitude takes place, it should not prevent the legislative on both sides of the Atlantic seeking assurances, which the Minister is giving today, about the fallout from the scale of the top-secret information now in the public domain, and indeed the changes that may be considered to significantly limit such an event being repeated again. So I ask the Minister not to hide behind that general veneer of secrecy here, but to be frank with the House about the process. Mass data is accumulated from a multitude of sources. This is then summarised to provide relevant information. Analysis of that information forms the intelligence picture, which is then presented to decision makers that can then lead to action that might limit or alter the behaviour of an adversary, to close down a threat, or indeed inform and persuade other nations to join our cause. So may I ask the Minister, I'm pleased to hear that he and the Secretary of State are speaking with their counterparts, but does he believe that too many eyes now have general access to sensitive intelligence, with the pendulum of sharing files swinging too far after 9/11? Is there now too much information, almost by default, now classified as top secret? For example, if Egypt is intending to supply missiles to Russia, surely the world arguably should know about this. Or if a Russian Su-27 jet did deliberately attempt to fire a missile on an RAF rivet joint over the Black Sea last September, this is an act of war, the details of which surely should be publicised, not hidden away in intelligence files. We certainly must avoid another Daniels Ellsberg situation. Mr. Speaker, as the world enters a dangerous chapter and we slide potentially into another Cold War, the parameters in which we share and act upon pooled intelligence surely must be overhauled so they are fit for purpose. America absolutely is our closest security ally. But if a vital aspect of our relationship requires reviewing or addressing, surely we should have the confidence to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my right honourable friend notes, these apparently leaked documents are in the public domain, but that doesn't change their classification and thus the degree to which any UK minister or official can comment on their content. And so I won't be commenting on then the specifics of the examples he raised, nor any others over the course of this UQ. He's absolutely right in setting out the process by which information is gathered, assimilated, and presented to decision makers. He's absolutely right that the breadth and scale of information in the data age is enormous. And he's absolutely right that one of the key decisions that any organisation with intelligence at its core has to make is how you allow access to that information so the relevant people have it with which to make good decisions. He asserts that perhaps too many eyes now have access to that information. I think that's a matter for different departments in different countries to make. As you would imagine, Mr. Speaker, the MOD has looked at our own processes as a consequence of what's happened last week. We have to place huge trust in our vetting processes to assure that those who routinely have access to classified information have been risk managed appropriately. And even beyond that, within the vetted workforce, there is a very necessary compartmentalisation of information so that only those who need to see things to do their jobs see them. That said, what we're learning in the information age, where it is about getting ahead of the narrative of the other side, is that actually it is very useful to be able to think quickly about the information you have. And thus there is a balance to strike between being overly compartmented versus being in a position where people can be well informed and quickly make decisions in a way that meets the speed of relevance in modern competition. Suffice to say, and I hope the Right Honourable Gentleman, Mr. Speaker, and the House will be reassured that, of course, the Permanent Secretary, on seeing what happened in the DoD last week, has had a good look at what's going on inside the MOD to make sure if we've any lessons to learn, we do so.
Shadow Secretary of State John Healey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The US is our closest security ally, so this is of serious concern. The intelligence we share bilaterally and through alliances like NATO and Five Eyes is fundamental to our UK national security, and it's essential that this continues confidently and confidentially. The Secretary of State for Defence is in Washington, we're told, apparently to discuss this breach. Will he make a statement to Parliament on his return to confirm the reassurances he's received on how British intelligence is handled? The Minister is right to say the US agencies are treating this seriously. The Pentagon says it expects findings from its investigations within 45 days. 2 years ago, UK classified documents on Challenger 2 tanks were similarly reported leaked to an online forum for video gaming, War Thunder. What action was taken following this leak? And I have a number of questions which the Minister has not yet answered. He's described the documents as inaccurate. To what extent have they been manipulated, and to what extent have they been used as disinformation? Has this leak put at risk any UK personnel? And is the MOD, and how is the MOD, mitigating such risks? This is the time the UK should be accelerating military support to Ukraine. So what assessment has the government made of the impact on this leak on Ukrainian plans for a potential offensive? Mr. Speaker, while threats to the UK continue to rise, security breaches have in fact been getting worse on the Defence Secretary's watch. 2,000 people affected by data breaches in the last MOD annual report, a 40% increase on the number of referrals to the Information Commissioner. And that was last July. How many MOD data breaches have occurred since? And finally, why is no minister designated responsible for information security when handling the intelligence is so critical to our national security?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, I thought I was clear in my initial answer. The Secretary of State is in Washington this week for a briefing to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, which was requested in December, scheduled in January. It is fortuitous he's there to discuss these matters in addition, but it would be inaccurate to say that he is there because of what happened last week. The Right Honourable Gentleman asks about previous incidents where the UK MOD has been responsible for leaks. Every time that it happens, and I agree with him, it happens too often, but every time that it happens, reviews are put in place, lessons are learnt, both in terms of the way that information is handled digitally, and also, because this was the case last year, the way that documents are removed from the building. On the former, there has been a wide-ranging and robust effort made to assure the digital security of documents and to ensure that all users of secret and above systems are aware of the way that those systems should properly be used and how information should not be, even be attempted to be moved from one system to the other. And on physical documents, the Secretary of State put in place bag searches, random bag searches at MOD main building immediately following the leak of hard documents last year, and those searches remain in place now. The Right Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right to observe that some of these documents, since their apparent leaking, have been apparently manipulated for various mis- and disinformation purposes, hence why it is important not only to qualify that colleagues should be suspicious of the original content, but should be very suspicious of different versions that are in circulation subsequently because they have been manipulated for various means. He is, of course, right to flag his concern, which mirrors our concern for any force protection implications from leaks such as these. That was indeed our first concern, and the Chief Joint Operations was able to quickly reassure us that all of those involved in the protection of the diplomatic mission in Ukraine are not compromised in any way by these leaks, nor any involved in the wider support for Ukraine and the wider continent beyond. I don't think that there is any impact on the Ukrainian plans for the offensive. In fact, as he will have seen in the reporting of these, there has been a degree of amplification from the Ukrainians around some of the casualty statistics. I make no comment on the accuracy of the figures that have been pumped, and indeed there is reporting that those figures have been manipulated by both sides to tell their story. But I'm pretty confident that the Ukrainians are intending to stick to their plan and go for it. On precisely how many breaches, that is not information I have for me today, but I'll write to him.
Dr. Judy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't wish to be disobliging to my right honourable friend who succeeded me as Chairman of the Defence Select Committee, but I feel it necessary to ask the Minister to clarify the point beyond any doubt or confusion that matters relating to defence intelligence, like matters relating to the intelligence roles of other departments, do not fall within the ambit of the departmental select committees, but should and rightly do fall within the ambit of the Intelligence and Security Committee. My right honourable friend was courteous enough to let me know that he had been granted this urgent question after it had been granted. Had he asked me before applying, I would have advised him first that it was not within the remit of the Defence Select Committee to seek information on this matter, and secondly, as the Minister's replies have indicated, that it would be very unwise, particularly at this early stage, to discuss the implications of such a leak in public. So will the Minister confirm that in any future questions and answers about defence intelligence, he will address his answers to the appropriate committee, which is the Intelligence and Security Committee?
Can I just help a little bit? I granted the UQ, not because it's chairman of the committee, because I thought it was appropriate. So actually, we don't need to level it in that way. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much indeed, because I value both the friendship and the counsel of the current Select Committee Chair and the previous one, and so I think maybe you've said it all.
We now go into SNP spokesperson Owen Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be equally brief, and I think there are clearly some serious issues here to consider, and it's very, very important that we avoid speculation, particularly as I understand that this case is obviously sub judice in the US. No doubt our intelligence community are working hard with our partners to review the implications reported to, and will be reporting to the ISC. I certainly don't want to be prejudging anything, but just to echo the comments of the Chair, will the Minister confirm that he will work closely with the ISC to make sure that we are fully able to consider any outcomes that come forward from this investigation.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I note the honourable gentleman's concern, and indeed my right honourable friends, the chairman of the Information and Security Select Committee, will make sure that any matters that can be exposed to them relating to this are done so.
Teresa Villiers.
I believe the whole House should welcome the great seriousness with which this is being taken by our government and by the government of the United States as well. And I think it's important for us really to acknowledge that mass leaks of this kind really are unjustified and serve only to help the interests of those terrorist groups and hostile states who would wish us harm.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. These leaks, as unfortunate as they are, only really benefit one group of people, and those are our competitors and adversaries in the world who mean us harm. And so whatever the heroic intentions those responsible for these leaks may think that they have, they are wrong. They risk the safety of our armed forces, and they compromise the work that we and our allies are doing around the world to stand up to the challenge to the rules-based international order that we so strongly believe in.
Cavan Jones.
I thank the Minister for his statement. Can I concur with his views about the close relationship that we rely on, not just the United States, but there are Five Eyes partners. Now, the Intelligence Security Committee hasn't yet met to discuss this issue, and it is the only committee of Parliament which will be able to look at the classification of material which is covered, and I think it's right not to make any preemptive statements about what have been in the press. But can I ask him, if we do decide that we wish to look at this, which is, I think there's a good chance we will, that we'll get full cooperation from not only the Defence Intelligence but other intelligence agencies in terms of pursuing the rightful questions I think that we can uniquely ask in the closed environment which we meet.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in the interests of not only expectation management but accuracy to the House, may I say to the right honourable gentleman that I will ensure that we do all that we are allowed to do, and of course we will make sure that the committee is serviced with whatever is releasable, accepting of course that the content that has been leaked is not US content, and that might mean that that's a very difficult thing for us to do.
Sarah Atherton.
Mr. Speaker, we know that Russia is a master of propagating disinformation, and this is an evolving tactic increasingly used by hostile states. So can the Minister give assurances that this issue is being looked at and considered in the Defence Command Paper refresh?
I certainly can. It's a very important thing that we've learned over the course of the last year, that the way in which you own the narrative and that you counter disinformation is almost every bit as important as the physical reality of the battle on the ground. And it's an important part of our work in the Command Paper refresh as a consequence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The leak in the US should, and I'm sure is, focusing the Minister's minds on the importance of our own information security. So, to that end, can I ask him to give an assurance that all information and data relating to our own armed forces personnel that is held by private sector contractors, particularly those that are foreign owned, is secure?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would fully expect it to be, but perhaps I could take his exact question away, ask the question of the department and write to him so that we can both have confidence that my expectation is well founded.
Manchester.
Mr. Speaker, with regards to the top secret document leaks and learning from previous incidents, the Minister would know a number of years ago the details of our brilliant former ambassador to the United States were leaked, and that had real ramifications with regards to our relationship with the United States and the issue of secret documents being shared within government departments. Can I ask the Minister this? Learning lessons from that to address the challenges now, were there any specific lessons learnt from that incident with regards to the Foreign Office and the and how our brilliant former ambassador was treated with regards to doing his job and the leak of secret documents. And the point raised by the chairman of the Defence Committee with regards to who sees these documents, number of individuals seeing that and restricting that. Does the Minister have a view on that?
Mr. Speaker, as the Shadow Secretary of State set out in his own question, there have been occasions where we reside in a glass house on these matters, and so I'm reluctant to throw stones at any other department.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And of course, the Minister is right that we must be careful around leaked US documents that may turn out to be misinformation or disinformation. They do appear to reveal that the UK Rivet joint aircraft was subject to a near miss. If the Secretary of State had assessed that the Rivet joint aircraft had been intentionally fired upon, would he have shared that Ministry of Defence assessment with the House?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Secretary of State has briefed the House on that incident. I'm not going to offer any discussion on the version of events that was put across in the leak.
John Cryer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This has been touched upon before. Probably the main short-term worry amongst across both sides of the House is that this leak might compromise the spring offensive, the much vaunted spring offensive, which may be the most crucial move in the effort to repel Putin. On that basis, will the Secretary of State undertake to appear before the ISC as soon as there's anything substantive to report?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think there's two separate issues there. What the impact may or may not be of this leak on the Ukrainian spring offensive. And the Shadow Secretary of State asked me whether I thought it would have any consequence on that. I don't. I think the Ukrainians will proceed with their plan as it is, and I have every confidence that they will be successful. The international effort to resource their plan is extraordinary, and the plan is coming together very well indeed. As for whether any matters relating to the spring offensive and these leaks should be briefed to the ISC, as I said in response to a previous question, the difficulty will be that this is not our information to brief, nor is it a leak from the UK MOD. And so whilst I have undertaken to a number of colleagues who are on that committee to ensure that wherever we are able to, we share what we can with that committee, I have to be very clear that it's not our information to share, nor was the leak our leak. And thus I suspect that we're rather limited in what we can say and do with the committee on this matter.
Gavin Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his response and recognise that the hallmark of the last 12 months have been MOD's willingness, I think, to publish Defence Intelligence Unit reports and to give decision makers and Parliament, legislators and all those affected the information that we need to discern between disinformation and to guard against false flags. And I do welcome the indication he has given to the Chamber this afternoon that there is a review underway by the Permanent Secretary around processes to ensure that the retention of information and intelligence particularly is as it should be within the department. But having shared that this afternoon, can I ask the Minister to undertake to return to the House in some form through statement or written ministerial statement on this issue when the review is complete, recognising of course that substantively the detail contained within that review would be more appropriate for the Intelligence and Security Committee?
Minister.
Very happy to make that undertaking as we both conclude our internal reviews. We will make sure that if there is further information to offer to the House, we do so. And similarly, I've made a number of commitments to offer assurance through written answers. We'll make sure those written answers are shared with the Library.
Toby Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The arrest of a fairly junior 21-year-old National Guardsman in relate to this begs the question of who has access to top secret information. Pentagon officials say thousands, if not tens of thousands of people would see those kind of documents. Now, the Minister's right to say it's a matter for the Americans who has access to their documents, but in terms of things that we share with them that are British information, what reassurances can the Minister give us in terms of what we're able to say about the level of seniority with which information that we share with the Americans goes on the basis of this very worrying development?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we certainly draw no boundaries based on seniority around the information that is shared bilaterally UK-US or within Five Eyes or NATO or wherever else. Information flows to where it is needed, and sometimes the analyst that is expert on a particular piece of Russian capability might be a relatively junior non-commissioned officer, but they might be the best in the world at that area of expertise. And so I think rank is probably not the right boundary to set. But what we are very careful about, and I think the United States and other Five Eyes partners are similarly clear about, is information goes to where it is needed, not to where it is necessarily wanted. That level of compartmentalisation gives enormous assurance. Leaks like these are exceptional rather than the norm, and I think it's important that we put this, no matter how grave it appears to be, in the context of a vast amount of information that is shared between the UK and US and within the Five Eyes routinely, and that never ever sees anything other than the eyes for which it was intended.
Catherine West.
There are clearly issues around the process of vetting individuals, and what reassurances can the Minister give that he says lessons are being learned, but is there something which rings a bell around the policing problems we've seen here in the UK around vetting? What can be done holistically to look at vetting of individuals who have access to information held by the state in terms of confidential information about individuals who have access to top secret processes?
So, Mr. Speaker, I looked anxiously for reassurance from the Policing Minister, but my sense is that the vetting to which the Honourable Lady refers with regards to the police is a background and character check around their initial employment, and is therefore somewhat different to the developed vetting process that is used within government, and particularly within the MOD and the security agencies, to assure access to top secret and compartmented information. That process is an extraordinarily rigorous process involving very in-depth background checks that go back a number of generations, plus interviews and other evidence gathering that allows us a relatively high level of assurance about the people to whom we share information. The exact process is perhaps not something that should be set out exactly in public, but it is a process in which I and other ministerial colleagues have great confidence.
Martin Docker to use.
Speaker, I think a somewhat overlooked revelation from these documents was that the UAE and Russia were not only cooperating on evading international sanctions, but, and I quote the AP report, in mid-January, the FSB officials claimed UAE security services officials and Russia had agreed to work together against US and UK intelligence agencies, according to newly acquired signals intelligence. Now, despite this knowledge, Mr. Speaker, the government continues to facilitate military, security and economic exchanges with authoritarian Gulf states and encourages them to make massive investments in infrastructure across these islands. So can I ask the Minister, after the Russia report, has this government learned nothing about the cost of doing businesses with authoritarian regimes, or will they continue just to be the frog that thinks it can ride the back of the scorpion?
Oh. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in a style with which I'm now familiar, the Honourable Gentleman comes left and right flanking and down the centre all at once. But at the heart of the question was an invitation to reflect on some of the content of the leaks, and as I've been very clear, I'm not going to do so.
Group Farry.
Speaker, we know that leaks of secret and top secret military information puts lives at risk. At what point were soldiers on the ground made aware of the breach, and what support has been put in place practically for them as well as emotionally for their families at home?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the troops on the ground, those involved in the protection of the diplomatic mission in Kyiv, will have likely been aware of it as it broke in the news. It is not for them to worry about their force protection beyond the tactical measures they can take locally. That's a matter for the permanent joint headquarters, and the Chief Joint Operations was quick to assess what the implications may be for their force protection. He concluded that there were none, and the mission can safely continue. And the amazing thing about the men and women who serve in our nation's uniform is that their instinct is to carry on with the mission at hand, not necessarily to worry for their safety. We're very lucky that that's the way that they approach these things.